One of the most often requested dishes I receive across the country is shrimp and grits. And I'm going to share with you a very simple recipe today. Tequila lime shrimp and grits. You're going to love this recipe. So when making our shrimp and grits, one of the most important elements is cooking really good grits. And there's such a variety of grits that you can use that are on the market today. They're yellow grits, stone ground grits, instant grits. And for the sake of our ease today, we're going to use what's an instant grit or a 5-minute grit. If it says 5 minutes, don't believe that, because I've never been able to get these things done in 5 minutes. I usually like to cook these 20 or 30 minutes. And if you're cooking stone ground grits, allow a lot more time. But the most important thing about making the grits is that we have the proper relationship or ratio between liquid and the grits. And far too many people don't have enough liquid when they do grits. And I think that the best way to do it is a 5-to-1 ratio. So if we have 1 cup of grits, we have 5 cups of liquid. If we have 2 cups of grits, which we have today, we're going to have 10 cups of liquid. There are a lot of combinations that we can use. We can use all chicken broth, all water, all milk, all cream, or a combination of any of those, any ratio that you want to divide it into, we can do that. So today we're going to be using chicken broth, and we're going to be using heavy cream. And we're going to make some really, really creamy grits. Now when we're making shrimp and grits, we add something a little different. Now I'm going to start out with about 2 cups of chicken broth right here. Put it in this pot. And it's good if you make your own chicken broth, but if not, just buy some. So we're going to start out with 2 cups of chicken broth. We're taking our shrimp tails and we're going to put it into our stock here, our chicken stock, and we're actually going to make a shrimp stock. So we're going to let those boil for probably about 5 or 6 minutes. Then we'll take the tails out, and then we'll go ahead and add our heavy cream and get it up to temperature before we add our grits. We've removed our shrimp tails and we've added more flavor into our stock there. And now I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. I'm going to add 3 more cups of cream. So we had 2 cups of chicken stock or chicken broth, and then we put our tails in there. Then we're going to add 3 cups of cream. And let me not forget the butter here. I'm going to put about a half a stick of butter in there. Be careful when you do that. Couple options with your shrimp. You can leave the tails on or take the tails off. And the way you take the tail off is just grabbing it, pinching it right there at the end, and then the tail will slide right off. Now what I do when I make shrimp and grits, I'll do a variety. I'll take the tail off of most of the shrimp, but I'll leave the tail on about 3 tails per serving for the rest of the shrimp, because I can do a nice presentation by leaving the tails on. Our liquid's come to a boil, so it's now time to add our grits. And we're going to, don't just dump all these in at one time, because they'll clump together. I always like to pour just a little at a time, stir them in real good. And when I make shrimp and grits, I try to make these a little looser than normal, because they will thicken up, especially as they cool down some. And this dish, you can freeze this. It freezes very well. Get it cooled down and stick it in the freezer, and you can freeze it for up to about 3 months. It does very well when you reheat it. You may have to rehydrate it a little bit, but it'll be perfectly fine. I've incorporated all the grits. I've stirred those in. I don't see any lumps in here, that's kind of important. So what I'm going to do now is just bring this back up to a boil, which it just takes a second. There it goes. And then I'm going to turn it down to a simmer. Heat control is very important. Now we're going to monitor this. I'm going to put a lid on this, but I'm not going to forget about it. Every 2 or 3 minutes, I'll take the lid off very carefully and then stir my grits again. That lid right on there. We'll come back and check it in 2 or 3 minutes. Checking on our grits here. We're keeping them stirred. They're looking really good, by the way. So I'm going to turn that heat down just a little bit. And be sure to keep these stirred and scrape across the bottom of your pan there, because you don't want these things to scorch. And what we're going to do now is something a little special. I have some queso cheese melted here with a little bit of jalapeno in it, just to give it a little kick, since these are Southwestern shrimp and grits. And so I'm going to put about a cup in there, and we're going to stir that into our grits. And I've kept this cream Mexicana over here in case I want to thin these down a little bit. That's really great stuff to use. In fact, you can use that when you're making your grits, and it really make them very nice. So I'm gonna put the lid on that. I'm gonna take it off the heat and just let that kind of steam in there a while, and we're good. We're good on those grits. They look super, super good. We've cooked our grits. I've set them aside. They're staying warm with the lid on them. And I've heated up this skillet. I'm going to add a little bit of avocado oil here. You can use olive oil or whatever oil of your choice. And we're going to get that good and hot before we add our mirepoix. So we're going to add our onions, our bell peppers, our garlic, and saute those a little bit. This is a half of an onion. I'll use, you know, the measurements of whatever you want them to be. If you want more onions, more peppers, whatever, it doesn't really matter. So I use some red bell peppers, green bell peppers, and we're going to cook those for just a minute till they're good and tender. Man, I tell you what, this is really smelling great. I always like to have some chicken bouillon or chicken base to add to my grits, and I'm going to do that. I can still stir that in, it won't hurt a thing. And remember, anytime you put something like this in, it contains salt, sodium, and so you may not want to salt your grits. So just keep that in mind, and I'm going to go add this to the grits in just a minute. I'm going to take a little bit of Rotel, and this is an optional ingredient, of course. Again, these are Southwestern tequila lime shrimp and grits, so how can you do those without a little bit of Rotel in there? And you can buy this mild or spicy, ever how you want it. Put in as much or as little as you want to. I think it just gives it a nice little touch. I'm going to add my garlic, a little bit of that. You have to have garlic. And I want to add a little bit of jalapeno pepper, just a little bit, just to kick it up a little bit. Then, one of my favorite spices of all time is cumin. I love cumin, and that's a really important part of this recipe, I think. I'm going to put a little bit of that in with my mirepoix. Put some cilantro, fresh cilantro in there. And the aroma in this room is right now just almost undescribable, cooking these vegetables. So I'm cooking these separate from my shrimp, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. So we're going to cook these, then we're going to add this to our grits. Tell you what we're going to do is squeeze a little bit of lime juice in there. Let me go ahead and add my little bouillon or chicken base in there before I forget to. Turn that off. We're going to add that right over here to our grits. So those have thickened up a little bit, and I thought they would. I'm going to go ahead and add some of this in there just to thin them down some. Always have that extra cream on hand, or chicken broth, or whatever you want. I just like using the cream. I'm going to go ahead and cover those back up. Add a little bit of oil back to it. Now it's heated up. Generous amount there. And I want this to be pretty hot when I put these shrimp in here. I like to get a good sear on those. Listen for the sizzle. And don't overcrowd these. You can cook them in batches. We're going to just let those cook. We're going to leave them alone so they'll brown. We're going to take these out and cook our next batch. So those are browned up pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and add all the shrimp together here. Come back and add some lime, a little garlic, a little cumin. Now I'm going to come and add the good part, the tequila. There we go. Let that tequila burn off just a little bit. So I'm going to bring those up to temperature, let them cook just a minute. I don't want to overcook these. We have our grits over here. They're still nice and hot. They look really good. Tell you what, let's do. Let's put a few shrimp down on the bottom there as a little surprise for somebody. Good, nice, generous scoop. Put right on there. I'm going to add a shrimp there. Add a few around it. Take some of our juice there. Pour right over the top of it. And there you have it, tequila lime shrimp and grits. A little bit of cilantro on top of it there. A little garnish, and cilantro is always good. It's a very simple dish, nothing complicated about it. I have about 25 different recipes of shrimp and grits that we can use. And a nice little holiday dish there if you want to cook it for the holiday when family and friends are coming over. Another thing you can do, and I do it often, a lot of times, is I'll put cream into my shrimp after I cook it, and then just pour it all into the grits together and then serve it that way. So thank you for watching today. Like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and remember, above all things, not only love to cook, but cook to love. And I'll see you next time on All Things Food.